Beneath the whispering canopy of the forest, strangers advanced, their spears and maces slicing through the dense undergrowth. Shadows began to stir as they moved, and then it came, the ambush. A hail of arrows rained down, met by the warriors' swift counterattacks with slings and precise thrusts. When the chaos subsided, the travelers cared for their injured and mourned their fallen. Combat in the woodland frontier was unforgiving, especially to those unprepared for its trials. These strangers were no mere wanderers, but soldiers of Tintu, the mighty Inca Empire. Their domains spanned vast lands, uniting millions from the forest edge to the arid desert coast, from the southern plains to the towering peaks, all connected by an intricate network of roads guarded by fortresses and monuments. Born in the mountains, the Inca dynasty reigned supreme over this sprawling realm. The story of how the Inca Empire rose to dominate such vast lands has been passed down in fragmented forms, through legend, prophecy, and now, the clues left behind in stone and bone. While the tales of their collapse often captivate attention, their ascension is a narrative that deserves equal regard. This is the story of the Inca Empire's rise to greatness. Uncovering the histories of ancient civilizations can be challenging, but uncovering our own ancestry can sometimes feel just as elusive. Despite having roots scattered across the globe, I simply input a few details from a few generations back, and the platform quickly connected me to related matches, records, and family trees spanning over a century. Among the fascinating discoveries was an ancestor of mine, Benjamin Marshall, who signed a letter defending the innocence of his neighbors during the Salem witch trials. With over 19 billion records available, naturally, I couldn't help but flood my family group chats with the incredible findings the platform uncovered. The 1901 Irish census offers a snapshot of my family's history, ages, names, occupations, all preserved through time. Then there's the record of my great-grandfather's journey from Ireland to Boston in 1910, later amended to 1911, with tools to colorize and even animate old photos. Here's an image of my grandfather from the Philippines, now vivid and alive. These discoveries feel deeply personal, priceless even. As for another tale of heritage, King Viracocha began his ascent by expanding his modest kingdom through strategic alliances and decisive conflicts, guided by his court and the cryptic wisdom of oracles. Among his offspring, he favored one son, Inca Orco, showering him with treasures, servants, and concubines, while withholding such indulgences from his other son, Inca Ipanqui. Wise, brave, and compassionate, Ipanqui was a figure of envy and scorn for his father, yet his qualities hinted at a destiny far beyond the confines of royal jealousy. Ordained by the gods to rule, Viracocha was eighth in the line of Inca kings, who in the previous 2 centuries came to rule the city of Cusco and its immediate surroundings. He desired that his favored son Inca Orca would one day succeed him. But the Incas had made enemies. A people called the Chancas declared war. Viracocha, Orco, and their men fled the city to fortified strongholds. Inca Ipanqui remained, determined that the Golden City would not fall so long as he lived. In the mountains, a mighty contingent of the Chanca army marched toward Cusco and stormed down the Morning Hills, where Inca Ipanqui and the defenders met them. It was said that the creator god sent the Incas aid in the form of heavenly warriors. Blood covered the rocks, and at last, Inca Ipanqui stood triumphant. He brought the treasures and prisoners of battle before his father so that the king could customarily display victory by treading on the vanquished. But Viracocha insisted Inca Orco perform the kingly honor, and Inca Ipanqui departed in anger. Viracocha, suspicious of the rising status of his son Inca Ipanqui, sent men to kill him, but the prince's loyal followers warned him and thwarted the attack. Inca Ipanqui returned to Cusco with his men, whereupon 2 more divisions of Chancas attacked. The audacious prince struck down one of their commanders and caused the heads of their captains to be set on the points of lances and raised on high. The Chancas fled in fear, and Inca Ipanqui publicly decorated Cusco with the flayed skins of their leaders, that all might see the valor of the Incas. This narrative served as a kind of foundational legend for the Incas, extolling the righteousness and divine favor of the prince. Whether Inca Yupanqui had truly saved Cusco from a massive Chancre invasion is a matter of contention, but in some manner the young prince had shown his worth. Perhaps around the year 1438, Inca Yupanqui received the sacred fringe of rulership about his head. As emperor or Sapa Inca, he took the name Pachacuti, which means roughly the change of time or the earth shaker. Pachacuti was indeed the herald of a new age. The deposed Viracocha had returned to the city in submission, and by one account Inca Orco attempted to take Cusco and was slain by Pachacuti and his men. Pachacuti first oversaw the long renovation of Cusco, would stretch across the valley and support many thousands of people. Its urban center consisted of planned and paved roads, which ran between temples, forts, and noble residences. Philosophers and great thinkers recorded history, recited sagas, and studied the stars. In the city plazas were hosts to the arts, dramatic plays, ballads, and sacred. The first to accept the rule of Pachacuti were the neighboring mountain regions, where people guided llamas up misty passes tracing high into the cliffs. These were the common folk of the Andes, living as they had for millennia. The sun's daily trek over the peaks warmed the rocks and nourished the soil. Men and women cultivated crops including maize, quinoa, and tubers such as potatoes. The Andean climate varies dramatically with elevation, so communities settled across altitudes to reap a variety of food and goods. Stone-sided terraces, filled with gravel and soil, converted slopes into arable land and retained heat and moisture, protecting crops against drought and mountain frost. They lived in stone dwellings. Men wore tunics, women dresses and sashes, complemented by overcloaks, while headdress varied by local custom. This clothing was largely spun from wool shorn from their llamas and alpacas, which along with guinea pigs provided meat. Communal support eased the burden of this life. But in the preceding centuries, warring, decentralized factions had raided and pillaged widely. Pachacuti now offered the people and their lords the security of the Inca Empire. By the ancient custom of reciprocity, peasants received safety in certain quantities of gifts or food from the state and were in turn obliged to fulfill the mita, a taxation paid in labor. The Incas did not use currency. The head of each household typically owed the empire 2 to 3 months of labor, often farming, making textiles, or constructing imperial works. The Incas limited and rotated labor demands so as not to deprive communities of their self-sufficiency. And the empire demanded of its men an additional task to fight for their king. Many lords would not willingly relinquish power to the Incas. While the chronology and details of Inca conquest differ in many accounts, a general picture of expansion emerges. Early in the reign of Pachacuti, a conqueror called Chuchicapac insisted that the so-called Earthshaker pay homage to him, whereafter he would use the skull of Pachacuti as a goblet from which to drink in triumph. Chuchicapac ruled the Collas to the southeast. The undaunted Pachacuti set out to demonstrate the might of the Inca Empire. His army moved swiftly across the mountains, seeking a decisive battle. At its core were the seasoned warriors of Cusco, protected by helmets and shields crafted from thickly padded cloth reinforced with cane. However, the majority of the Inca forces were commoners, often relying on makeshift defenses, even using cloaks as shields. Their arsenal included maces, spears, halberds, clubs, and slings. Battles typically began with a barrage of rocks and javelins to disorient the enemy, followed by a fierce direct assault. Strategic divisions stood ready to flank the opposition or serve as reserves. In this encounter, the Collas held firm for hours until Pachacuti, leading his elite guard, broke through their lines and captured Chuchicapac. The enemy's morale crumbled, and victory was secured. While the Incas generally spared captured soldiers, their treatment of enemy leaders was far harsher. Upon returning to Cusco, Pachacuti ordered the public execution of Chuchicapac by beheading. This victory sent shockwaves through the region, compelling many Altiplano lords to submit. Those who swore loyalty were allowed to retain local authority and enjoyed imperial privileges, But those who resisted faced the full might of the Inca army, which at its zenith could muster over 100,000 warriors. Drawn up for battle, the Incas employed psychological warfare. One account recalled the Incas shouting, "We will drink from the skull of the traitor. We will adorn ourselves with a necklace of his teeth. We will play the melody of the pinku with flute made from his bones. We will beat the drum made from his skin, and thus we will dance." Most enemies simply surrendered, and conquest proceeded without bloodshed. As the Incas marched into their new domains, they did not loot or massacre. Rather, Inca officials folded local leaders into the state apparatus, then constructed storehouses filled with massive stockpiles of food, drink, textiles, and other supplies to be distributed as gifts for the loyal, provisions for those who serve the state, or relief in times of famine. Many storehouses stood high on open hills, ever visible reminders of the prosperity and generosity of the Inca overlords. The emperor was styled Huactecoyac, lover and benefactor of the poor. Every conquered household and lord was meticulously accounted for and reported to Cusco. The Incas, lacking a written alphabet or glyphic system, relied on the ingenious use of quipus, knotted cords of various colors attached to a central string. The placement and color of the knots, understood within the context of the message, encoded precise information. Through this system, officials recorded historical events, managed storehouse inventories, conducted regular censuses, and relayed updates from the war front. After subduing the Koyas in the southern dominions, Pachacuti solidified his control over the sacred Lake Titicaca region. This lake held profound spiritual significance, as the Incas believed it was where the creator god, Viracocha, brought forth the sun, moon, and stars into existence. While the Incas passionately worshipped the sun god Inti, they revered Viracocha as the primal source of creation, the one who gifted the world with light, wisdom, and order. Pachacuti's victories not only expanded the empire, but also anchored its spiritual and cultural unity. It was this creator god who was believed to have sculpted statues at the lakeside ruins, which so captured Inca imagination. These monuments, gateways, and abandoned temples were in fact the vestiges of the long-dead Tiwanaku civilization, which urbanized in the 4th century and steadily expanded. For the Incas did not represent some sudden ascent from a static past of humble villages. The Andean region had flourished as a cradle of complex states and urban centers for millennia. On the coast, the ancient Nazca Confederation erected great cities and marked the desert floor with colossal drawings of animals and people. And the great Moche civilization constructed pyramids that now sloped in the sun, their kings entombed with their treasures like the pharaohs of old. Portrait vessels displayed the Moche mastery of artistic naturalism, each wrinkle and subtle expression of an ancient people preserved in ceramic. By 1000 AD, most of the once great polities of the Andes had declined. Valleys were abandoned, and the fractured region was dominated by raiding and chaos. Yet by the middle of the 15th century, one formidable rival remained to challenge Pachacuti's expanding Inca Empire, the Chimera Empire. This coastal power ruled over 1 million people and boasted a capital, Chanchan, framed by towering walls and adorned with statues. Its irrigated farms, orderly streets, and sacred temples supported a population of approximately 30,000. Undeterred, Pachacuti pressed his conquests northwest through the Peruvian Sierra and along the coast. On one of these northern campaigns, he entrusted his son, the ambitious and capable Tupac Yupanqui, with leading the army. Espionage played a crucial role in Inca campaigns. Scouts identified enemy weaknesses and even crafted clay models of the terrain to prepare for battles. Prince Tupac Yupanqui led his forces through the high, arid lands, storming fortresses and compelling submission. When the Chimera Empire was nearly encircled, Tupac Yupanqui strategically descended the Moche River and threatened to cut off the coastal water supply. The Chimera Empire's surrender was neither immediate nor easy, but eventually it succumbed to Inca domination. Returning to Cusco, Tupac Yupanqui brought with him Chimu artisans renowned for their exquisite craftsmanship in gold, silver, textiles, and ceramics. His leadership during these campaigns demonstrated his tenacity and tactical brilliance, qualities that made him the most distinguished of Pachacuty's sons. Recognizing these traits, Pachacuty named Tupac Yupanqui as his heir, and the two may have even begun to rule the empire together. With the labor of the conquered peoples, the Inca state flourished, producing abundant harvests of maize and coca, and constructing monumental achievements that symbolized the grandeur of their empire. Royal estates, likely built under Pachacuty, included this sublime Ollantaytambo in a mountaintop settlement later known as Machu Picchu. There, clouds drifted among temples and residences, with trapezoidal windows and doors, much of it built of stones hewn so perfectly together that a knife's edge could not fit between them. Cool spring water trickled down the stone aqueducts of Machu Picchu, reaching first the royal baths and pooling out from fountains. All across the empire, the Incas constructed aqueducts and canals that irrigated farmland and routed water into settlements. Moreover, they connected the western edge of the continent like never before. At its height, the Inca road network measured an estimated 25,000 miles, linking the desert, mountains, and jungle. In certain stretches, it was finely paved, with stairs that climbed steep bluffs and walls drained in culverts to prevent erosion where needed. Simpler roads branched off to mountain shrines, mines, and settlements. Chasms were surmounted by woven bridges. This ambitious empire most of all demanded speed and communication. The Incas established a system of thousands of messengers, or chasquis, of impressive stamina, who perpetually manned waypoints at every 5 miles or so along the main roads. The previous runner signaled his arrival with a conch shell, related his message verbatim, and often delivered a quipu. In this manner, Inca messages could travel some 170 miles in 24 hours, communication that took weeks by horseback in the colonial era. The chasca system accomplished in mere days. This burgeoning system enabled seasoned Inca generals to lead armies on campaigns of conquest or consolidation. Tupac Yupanqui's campaigns along the coast led him to the formidable fortress of Angara, whose defenders repelled his initial assaults with stones and lances. Forced to retreat, Tupac Yupanqui bided his time. When the fortress defenders abandoned their posts to celebrate their victory, the concealed Inca forces ambushed them on the coast, slaughtering the unsuspecting celebrants. In a grim display of dominance, the Incas adorned the fortress walls with the swaying bodies of their fallen foes. To secure loyalty in conquered territories, the Incas implemented a shrewd strategy. They seized sacred local relics and brought them to Cusco. These captive items of worship discouraged rebellion, as their safe return depended on compliance, and they elevated Cusco into a central site of pilgrimage and reverence. As Pachacuty's armies extended their reach farther north, they ventured into the challenging terrain of Ecuador. During these campaigns, Tupac Yupanqui and his men reached the island of Puna. According to Chronicles, it was here that he encountered merchants on sailing rafts, who spoke of distant islands populated with people and riches. Inspired by these tales, Tupac Yupanqui is said to have embarked on a 9-month maritime voyage. Upon his return, he reportedly brought back people, goods, and stories from these distant lands, further solidifying his legend as an intrepid leader and explorer. Though the account may have been apocryphal, later writers speculated that he had reached the Galapagos or even Rapa Nui, known as Easter Island. Genetic and floral evidence do indicate that Polynesians made contact with South Americans before European arrival. Whether the Incas participated is much less certain. Tupac Yupanqui and his massive Inca armies were most accustomed to long journeys by land. The Incas forbade their soldiers to loot the innocent countryside, and so a large fraction of military caravans comprised porters and llamas to haul provisions. Along the way, settlements were to support the armies, and at regular intervals along the road, the Incas installed storehouses full of weapons, clothing, and food. People of the Andes preserved certain foods by an ancient method of freeze-drying that combined dehydration and exposure to the elements. Freeze-dried meat was called charca, the origin of the word jerky. After one arduous march east, Tupac Yupanqui and the Incas entered the Amazon. Nectarous flora and curious creatures enthralled the Incas, but the woods were also home to innumerable people. Conquest proceeded more simply where large polities could surrender on behalf of vast regions. The forest was different. Minor victories nonetheless earned the Incas colorful feathers, gold and honey, and new subjects. Expansion diversified the Inca army, which came to include bowmen of the forest and troops of the desert. Hardly monolithic, the empire would include millions of people of varied traditions and faiths who spoke over 150 languages. The Incas, for their part, spoke Quechua and enshrined the language as an imperial lingua franca. According to the Incas, their conquests were in part driven by an imperative to civilize the world. Beyond their state religion, they observed well-defined ethics and norms. The Incas condemned practices like cannibalism and the consumption of dog meat, enforced strict punishments for adultery and suspected witchcraft, and upheld the sanctity of family. As the population grew, so did the strength of the empire. In some regions, provincial governors even arranged marriages among unmarried commoners to maintain social order and ensure stability. Perhaps after his first expedition into the Amazon, Tupac Yupanqui returned to his aging father, Pachacuti. The great emperor imparted his final counsel, saying, "Son, you now see how many great nations I leave to you, and you know what labor they have cost me. Mind that you are the man to keep and expand them. When I am dead, take care of my body, that I may go to rest with my father, the sun." Pachacuti's passing sent ripples through a world deeply intertwined with divine will and ancestral reverence. His death was marked by ceremonies of profound magnitude, as the Incas offered their most precious possessions to the gods. Treasures were either buried or destroyed. Thousands of llamas were sacrificed, and hundreds of people offered their lives to honor the transition of the great emperor to the realm of his divine ancestors. This moment solidified Pachacuti's legacy, both as a ruler who had reshaped the Inca Empire and as a figure of eternal spiritual significance. Youths from across the empire who would join their king in death. Sacrifice had been practiced for millennia in Andean societies. And though the Incas did not practice it on a consistent or massive scale, they turned to it in times of natural disaster and changes of rules. The story of Pachacuti did not end with his death. The Incas believed the dead took another form, but their essence remained bound to the body. The mummies of former kings and queens continued to inhabit estates, attended to by their kin and consulted by shamans on imperial affairs. Even so, active kingship passed to Tupac Yupanqui, who mourned his father and then mustered his troops to return with renewed vigor to the jungle. Despair and confusion awaited them. The stories told that the forests were very dense and full of evil places, so that they could not force their way through, nor did they know what direction to take. The Sapa Inca's efforts to secure the submission of his subjects were fraught with skirmishes and the relentless toll of sickness. At one point, the emperor himself became lost, only to be rescued by a loyal general. During his absence, the Koyas took advantage of the chaos to stage a revolt, killing Inca officials and retreating to fortified strongholds. In such times of crisis, smoke signals rapidly carried news of rebellion across the empire. Tupac Yupanqui wasted no time, raising an army tens of thousands strong to crush the Koyas. After defeating them, he turned the skins of their captains into drums, a grim reminder of Inca dominance. Rebellious populations like the Koyas were subjected to the Mitma policy, which enforced mass resettlements. Entire communities were uprooted, their members scattered across the empire to prevent future insurrections, while loyal subjects were relocated to replace them. In other cases, populations were moved to less cultivated regions to expand agricultural productivity. With rebellions subdued, Tupac Yupanqui turned his attention southward, conquering territories that stretched into modern-day Argentina and Chile. His campaign halted around the Mal River, where some records suggest the Incas fought a grueling, multi-day battle against the formidable Mapuche people. Whether weakened by the exhausting march or the toll of warfare, Tupac Yupanqui eventually decided to lead his armies back to Cusco. The Inca Empire, known as Tawantinsuyu, or the Land of the Four Quarters, continued to grow under his leadership. Each of the empire's 4 regions was governed by an appointed official, with lower administrators managing over 80 provinces. This sophisticated system of governance organized the labor of hundreds of thousands, ensuring a steady flow of brilliant textiles, gold, food, and drink into Cusco and other key cities. Back in Cusco, Tupac Yupanqui advanced the empire's grandeur by overseeing the construction of monumental works, including the impressive fortress of Sacsayhuaman, further solidifying the city as the heart of Tawantinsuyu's vast and thriving domain. A soaring temple or fortress comprising a tower and elaborate buildings, atop several levels of cyclopean walls, made from colossal boulders cut, pulled, and by some ingenious process, elevated and impeccably fitted together. Decades later, a European visitor would write it was the greatest castle his countrymen had ever laid eyes on, and these walls are the most beautiful thing that can be seen of all the constructions. They are of such big stones that no one who sees them would say that they have been placed there by the hand of man. As Tupac Yupanqui well knew, his powerful throne was to one day pass from father to son, while Asapa Inca would marry many secondary wives for purposes of alliance. He was to devote himself to a queen who wielded influence and whose children alone could be legitimate heirs. Intimate relations between cousins or closer relatives were forbidden to commoners. But among the royals, it strengthened familial power and security. Tupac years before took as his primary wife his own full sister, Mama